Hey nerds, I'm going to talk more about this book, Individualization, or the institutionalization of individualism by Ulrich Beck, who's that postmodernist or post-structuralist sociologist. And of course, post-structuralists are endlessly strawmanned as postmodern neo-Marxists by people like Jordan Peterson and James Lindsay, and they weren't even postmodernists. And post-structuralism is different from postmodernism, and post-structuralists are called that because they criticize institutions of the modern era, such as religion, science, and government, and they deconstructed or rhetorically and in writing broke down these structures and criticized them, not in order to actually bring down bring down all of Western civilization or some shit like that. So anyway, in the book, Ulrich Beck talks about, like I said, the institutionalization of individualism, and that individualism has been so integrated into all aspects and institutions of our postmodern culture that just being an individual is the a priori, or the assumed way that people are supposed to be. That just doesn't need to be justified. This idea as a free liberal individual created by God, or not necessarily created by God if you're talking about more like the Enlightenment era. But anyway, he also talks in this book about the interesting idea that everyone wants to be a unique and special snowflake, but in only similar ways mostly. So I want to be an individual, but I want to be an individual in the same way as everyone else, but more successful, meaning that I want to get into better shape, become smarter, make more money, have a wife, kids, a car, and a picket fence, and all that shit, like the so-called American dream. Or people want to be rich and famous. Maybe they want to be a singer or a YouTuber or an actor or a musician or anything like that. And they want to be seen as special, but in an area where there are lots of other people who want to be special, and it's all a big collective of people who want to be individuals. So in a society, institutional individualism is so institutionalized that we are all, as a collective, trying to be individuals in mostly similar ways. So collectively as a culture, we're all collectively trying to be unique and special snowflakes. So anyway, in this section of the book, Individualization, Ulrich Beck gets into what he calls the promise of health, or genetic technology and eugenics. So let's get into that here. In Germany, and now I think he wrote this in the 80s or 90s, but I mean, this probably is still true today given the history of the Holocaust in Germany. But anyway, in Germany, genetic technology is still the object of heated debate. It is even the problem child for those who see it as their task to gain acceptance for modern technology in general. Memories of eugenics soon spring to mind, with the deadly, indeed murderous, consequences of a policy that distinguished and selected between the genetically good and then genetically inferior. It is this past which makes politicians and even some human geneticists rather alarmed about the scale of biological intervention that will become feasible. So, yeah, that makes sense. Like even people who are involved with studying and developing genetic technology can be cautious, especially in places like Germany with the history of the Holocaust. But of course, that wasn't the only place where there was eugenics, and you know, Jews, gypsies, gay people, black people, everyone were put into concentration camps and then, sterilized or executed based on their genes and whether they're an Aryan person with a tall, blonde haired, blue eyed German Aryan person. And like, think about genetic technology. If that happens, you could create an entire race of Aryans and then just commit mass genocide of all non-Aryans. Or since this has happened many times throughout human history, like it was during a long period of history, or relatively short depending on how you look at it, eugenics and phrenology, like the skull measuring thing to declare black people as inferior to white people, was very prominent, like in America and Canada and North American cultures, people were sterilized if they were seen as inferior. Of course, a famous one, although this might be a common misconception, but apparently Alan Turing, who arguably invented the computer, or or at least was heavily involved with it and was involved with breaking the code in World War II that helped the Allies win the war. He was allegedly at least sterilized for being gay. So like across, like obviously this happened in Europe and the so-called Eastern world too, as far as I understand, that people all over the world were sterilized for being like Jewish or gay or Italian or Mexican or Irish, because people like Italians and Irish used to be called literally the N word when they first immigrated to America. And so you create this culture, and then we can of course think of not just the consequences, well, not just those types of consequences like mass execution and sterilization through eugenics, but also things like, what if you can create an entire race of super soldiers who are are who are physically and mentally superior and never get sick because they have an enhanced immune system, and they heal injuries faster and they age more slowly and all this kind of shit. This type of like superhuman these groups of superhuman people could easily perhaps just take over the entire world, and then there will be an entire species of like even it could even be like Chinese or Mexican super. It depends on who develops the technology first. So it could be, let's say, the worst case scenario could be something like an entire nation of Aryan super soldiers. So basically, obviously, a lot of people know that there are many consequences of genetic technology, and it can lead to eugenics and the mass sterilization and genocide of everyone who are declared to be genetically inferior. So, the consequences of genetic technology can lead to eugenics and perhaps a mass army of Aryan super soldiers taking over the entire world and engineering the Fourth Reich.